Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hermitage Conversations.
Good evening, Ajahn Cunda.
Good evening,
everyone.
Venerable Nisabho.
Yes.
Good to see everyone. And, can you increase the size of that?
I can.
Make that out as well. So it is Tuesday, our usual time. Good to see so many people joining us. And
how are you, Ajahn?
I'm good.
Good.
Not much going on. Just enjoying the practice, enjoying the time. I really treasure the morning times here. Just getting up early. It's so quiet, and there's just as I've mentioned before, before the rush of the stream. Although it's not rushing so much anymore.
It was for a bit there,
It was
though.
a bit,
and
yeah.
I think we're going to get some more precipitation later this week as well. We have quite a bit of snow coming on the forecast.
Yeah, possibly some serious snow. So,
I've missed snow, Ajahn.
Yeah.
I've been in Thailand for a long time, so it's nice, actually.
I'm all right if we don't have any snow. I haven't seen a lot of snow either, but I'm okay without it. So anyway, enough talking about the weather. I hope everyone's well. Venerable Nisabho and I are just continuing with our practice. Very nice time. Just the two of us living here, and very few visitors. We've had some drop-ins recently, but
a group of Thai people who are training here for aviation just randomly came. Were staying nearby and they found us on Google and came walked here from the city. So
yeah,
that was quite inspiring. Actually, it was nice.
So people, they didn't walk from Portland, the city, but they did walk from White Salmon.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just so people know, it's not too normal for people to show up here. Maybe once every 2 weeks, somebody will come up and we heard about this place, but yeah, not so many surprises, and we don't have too much to go on. If anybody wants to ask any questions, we do have some questions here that were posted and to us beforehand.
We have had quite a lot of, we had a lot of questions to go into right off the bat these last times, and we do, like Ajahn Chunda said, have some, but we also wanted people to feel free to chime in and ask as they feel inclined.
One of the things I've been reflecting on is sometimes the difficulty to have a larger sense of your own practice while you're practicing. So how important it is to really have a sort of a sense of your mind and sort of your own barometer of the experience you're having each time. For example, you engage in formal sitting or just whatever you're able to, whenever you're able to tune into the mind. It can be quite a challenge to see clearly and to not taking things personally, and to see these are just some typical patterns I have, some sankharas that are arising. There's just these conditions, formations that are coming up in the mind. And it's hard because we're used to ourselves. We're used to constructing ourselves and creating who and what we are. And to break through that and try to not see that, or try to at least get the bigger picture, sort of the existential angst that can occur. It's not easy, and even through years of practice, I find this one of the hardest things that I deal with. Is just sit down and this is a difficult sit, or it should be better, or it should be different, or I wish it was like this, or I wish I was more like that, or I'm just not a great practitioner, or I wish I was better, or more skilled at this and that. And it's so much just not the present moment. It is and it isn't, with just you feel like something should be different, and that's the dukkha of our experience, that I don't like what's going on and it should be different than this. So just something that I think is helpful to name and to bring up in terms of when you're practicing, when you're looking at your own experience, not to be too mystified and charged up or unsettled around the sense of me and mine and what is wrong, and I have to fix something, and there must be something that's done. So
having trouble hearing you, they said.
I'll try to get a little closer. We were trying to deal with this beforehand, but just a little more dukkha. Hopefully that's better, Bob. You can give me a thumbs up if you can hear me a bit better. What do you have that kind of come up with your?
The yogi mind for me, it's what you're speaking to. This
Yeah.
sense of like when you're in the practice, how strange, like little things dilate and you get really sucked in, and it's very hard to step back when you're in it, which I think is part of the reason for all the form and rules the Buddha put in place, is it kind of holds you, in the midst of when the storm really, really gets going. So yeah, absolutely, Ajahn.
Yeah, and if you kind of, when you do get that perspective of like, oh yeah, there can just be such a relaxing into the moment of, it doesn't have to be great. The mind doesn't have to be in such perfect shape. We don't have to always feel like we're on top of the world or our meditation is going great. The whole point is to be aware of our experience, to be aware of dukkha, rather than getting some sort of bliss, getting something, some perfection. So, yeah. All right, you got me. Okay, you can hear me. Good. I'll try to stay right here.
Well, we have a question, Ajahn. Two, actually. Dave says, "Hello, Venerables. We learn it's honorable to defend these bodies with violence. What of karma? If there's risk of harming or killing in defense, is it wiser to never raise a hand?"
Honorable to defend these bodies with violence. Needs a little bit more explanation, I think.
So the
Yeah.
diehard ethos of Americana, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think defense is important. So, I mean, the point that Dave is making is I think with defense. And so the Buddha did say that defending oneself is okay, defending one's life. However, he did also say that you should never kill. And so, let's say somebody in defending their life kills someone, then we say, oh wow, that's it. They've really harmed themselves, which is possible, but not completely the case in terms of karma, because it's based. The Buddha said it's really based on your intention. So you can actually unintentionally kill someone and not face necessarily heavy consequences because you really had no intention. Let's say there's somebody who's just to the right of you and you happen to move your arm and you push them by mistake unintentionally. You're trying to save yourself from falling. You had no intention of even touching them and they fall down and they die. That's actually not, you have the karma of being clumsy, and you're going to probably feel some some very negative effects about that, what you've done, but your intention was not to harm, and so that's quite different, and that's where defense comes in. So anyway,
Yeah, I think the intention absolutely is the key thing, Ajahn. And I think if there's, like you said, the Buddha did allow for people to defend themselves, but if I think one knows that there's a chance of killing the other person in defense, I mean, these are really hypotheticals, but I mean, that intent, as long as one's intention is to escape and, whatever, then I think it'd be all right. I think a relevant reflection sort of off of this tangentially is just the sort of preciousness of human rebirth that the Buddha spoke of, and how this feels very relevant, more relevant for people's lives, is just really holding how rare it is to come into this form. And in the circles I was part of as a, before I ordained, there was a certain cavalier attitude, say in mountaineering or other sort of dangerous pursuits. And just to also hold on the other flip side, that the Buddha really spoke of the preciousness of this rebirth. And so trying to preserve one's life in a situation like that also is fine, as long as one's intention is not to kill, but just to get away, I'd say.
Yeah, I had a woman ask me once about, she was counseling people in the military in Thailand, and she wasn't Thai. I think she was American, and she was over there, and she said that she thought the Buddha had instructed that it's okay for example, for people in the military to do what they're trained to do, which is to kill. And And so the Buddha, according to her, this is what the Buddha taught. And I did agree that the Buddha did talk about fulfilling duties, but he definitely did not agree to intentionally taking the life of any being. He just never went there with his instructions. Like, well, in this case, you can do it. He just never said that. So, again, though, in the case of defense, as long as you're not trying to annihilate, to kill, to end somebody's life, then there's a different situation that's going on. And so one doing that is actually moving away from the kama of ending a life. You're trying to preserve a life, but you're also trying to defend yourself or others.
For me, Ajahn, that speaks to Karina's question a bit, because we're speaking about the first precept of not killing. And so during the precept giving ceremony of the 5 precepts of not killing, not stealing, not engaging in sexual misconduct, not lying, not taking intoxicants, at the end the monks will say, Silena sugating yanti, silena boga sampara, silena nibuting yanti tasamasilang visodaye, which basically means through sila one moves towards heaven. Sugating yanti, sukati is heaven. Silena boga sampara, it's a great sort of boon. And then silena nibuting yanti, one through sila one moves towards enlightenment. So you should keep this sila, something along those lines. And yeah, there's a phrase in the suttas which really has sunk in more and more over the years, where the Buddha says one becomes sensitive to the pleasure of being blameless, and that if one keeps good sila, then one enters any forum or group without fear. And what Ajahn's pointing to in terms of this intention to never, to really hold to these precepts clearly, for me there is a feeling of immense security, and it leads to a deep sense of self-respect over time. But so yeah, I think it's somewhat similar or on a related note.
Often you tend to hear sort of in our sort of modernity here, like especially around the Dhamma and the Dhamma coming to countries that have not had it in terms of their long history. So like the United States, Europe, any of these countries that it's that it's been more recently introduced. There's a great interest, obviously, as most of you know, in meditation, in developing the mind, and often sila is missed. It's not focused on, and it's quite unfortunate, because the way that you are able to settle your mind is through having a sort of a moral compass. And without that moral compass, the mind is quite unsettled. And this isn't always taken so seriously in terms of almost like it's secondary. Like, well, yeah, okay, I've heard about this morality stuff. Let's get to the meditation part. That's what I want to know. But the morality really is so integral and part of the meditation. And so people forget that, like I was just thinking about, like just little rules that we have as monks. You might want to violate something, just like because you just have a desire come up or something, like even just little things, something like not like throwing some dust around or whatever, something around food or tonics or whatever you're gonna have as a monk. And then like I always find if I just go for the greed or go for the want, or just kind of, I don't want to follow that or do that, there's always regret, and there's always regret in the mind. And so even if it's not necessarily a moral thing, which many of our rules are not actually morally based, they're just circumstantial or what seems appropriate, like eating in the afternoon or something like that. But when you break that sila, when that's broken, it's really felt palpably, I find, for myself in the heart. And the meditation is not very, very pleasant and very easy at all. So it has a way of offering confidence, as Venerable Nisabho said, of offering pacification to the mind, calmness, clarity. So really, sila is this sentence that you were talking about, or these sets of phrases at the end of the 5 precepts are so important. They're just reminding us.
Yeah.
Why we're following a moral code.
Yeah, and also Ajahn, on that note, Sumana brings up an interesting point of, doesn't the story of the saw illustrate that violence in return is not skillful? And she's referring, I think, to
Yeah.
the simile of the saw, which is a famous simile most of you probably have heard around, where the Buddha basically exhorts the monks that even if one was being, believed, sawed from limb to limb by a two-handled saw, he who gave rise to a mind of ill will would not be following my teaching. So it's a high bar.
I even think it's like a moment,
Yeah.
like a moment of ill will,
Muhurtam.
which is it can be depressing for people to hear that. So you think, how often does ill will come up? It can come up pretty easily. Yeah, so it's quite a beautiful bar to at least have there. It's important, though, I think contextually the Buddha is saying to not think that even if one's mind goes there, that there's an excuse for that. You know, that you're not following his teachings. It doesn't mean that one's condemned for it, or you know, or you know, how dare you not follow what the Buddha's teaching or anything like that. It's just much more along the lines of like, well, he even teaches not to do this, like to that level.
Yeah, and I would also say that the state of mind is what's really very key here. And I think what Sumana is bringing up is important. Like, I think what we're saying is not that if one's being attacked, one's justified in, you know, a hand for a hand or something. Just that, you know, if you're being, you know, if you're in threat of dying or something, giving a kick and then running away is completely in line with the Buddha's teaching. And I think if one can do that with a mind that isn't filled with ill will, that would be wonderful. I think in some back alley situations, one might not be perfectly, you know, poised in that way, but just a certain amount of practicality, and yeah, I think sometimes the most powerful, you know, state actions I've ever heard of have been those of people who have engaged in, you know, profound kind of acts of nonviolence in the face of violence. And obviously there's a place for that. And I think as practitioners, we never can justify anger. Like it's just, we have to hold ourselves to a higher bar than that, but we can act and take action from a place of solidity and care and equanimity. And I think in these extreme circumstances, which we're referencing now, which I think are very rare, but yeah, there could be situations where you, if your life's in danger, you give a kick and then run, you know. But we're definitely not advocating giving rise to states of ill will at all.
And I think that's important, that like giving rise to statement, because that, you know, when the Buddha says that, it reminds me of with all the taints, when he's talking about abandoning. I think it's under abandoning, where he says, you know, a practitioner does not allow a state to arise like that. It doesn't mean, I think, that like ill will can't bubble to the surface. It's like it's for me more that you're doing something about it. So like he doesn't give rise to it. He doesn't allow it to continue. He disbands it. He annihilates it. So you're immediately creating right effort, which actually is another question that we had about what right effort is. And that's really important when we think about the mind, that we're actually not just allowing a state that's unwholesome to be there and then inform our actions, which is how, you know, morality is broken. Is, you know, you have a desire, you have an aversion that comes up, and then you act on it. And so I think the Buddhist teaching here is you don't allow the mind to move in that direction, and even though it might be moving in that direction. So that's what happens if you have a saw. You know, you don't go with the flow of anger, aversion, ill will, fear, and so that's really when we get into right effort. And a question was asked, you know, what is right effort actually? And it is kind of looking at the state of the mind and seeing, like, how do I protect the mind? How do I not allow unwholesome states to arise that haven't arisen yet? And then how to keep wholesome states sustained, encourage them to arise and then sustain them once they're there. How to decrease unwholesome states if they have arisen, but also to prevent them from arising. So this is really an effort that's made. It's not like a pacification process when we're practicing, and it's not just through meditation either. It's just right effort is all the time. It's something we're really engaging in, and it's almost like one of the most important and profound teachings I think that the Buddha has for myself, but I think for most of us, like it's really that one has to do something here. It's not just watching breath after breath. It's actually like, oh, okay, investigating what does the mind need, what do I do here, what's best.
For me, that speaks to 2 points, Ajahn. And one is the fact that, as we've just spoken, just as keeping a mind of goodwill doesn't preclude making effort or defending oneself in certain situations, right effort, and the path is a teaching of effort. And I think that what we find is that when, say, the mind is kept in a good place, and we do have this, there's this misperception sometimes that Buddhists are passive and the practice is passive. But if we have that foundation in stillness, then all external action is potentized immensely. And what change we try to make in the world is far more powerful because it comes from the heart and a place of solidity. And and speaking of the right efforts, I think it's also the sutta you mentioned, Ajahn, the Sabbasava Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 2, about all the ways of abandoning taints. These are different ways that one can abandon the taints, and there's a variety. There is just some that you abandon by seeing. So you do look at them, and they do disappear with, say, just a sort of steady gaze. But then there are ones you abandon by avoiding, by enduring, by abandoning, by developing the counteracting factors. So for me, that's always that sutta specifically, in terms of talking about how right effort can manifest in all these different ways depending on the situation. And sometimes I find it is very like subtle, but sometimes it's, you do have to apply a good deal more of it. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts, Ajahn, on? Yeah.
Well, it's just I think it's essentially like when we examine what we're doing with our practice. I think one of the ways that in the earlier days when I was coming to just know what the Buddha was teaching, it was much more of a simplistic approach to just like I started earlier on in the conversation talking about just meditation and calming the mind and watching the breath. And this is all important, but without that teaching around what do you actually do with the nuances of the mind as you're dealing with difficult emotions, as you're dealing with the hindrances that come up and all the things that are pulling at you, or just having a difficult conversation, whatever it is. It's like there's a lot the Buddha has to say around how we should practice. So this question around right effort is simply that, like, you can use a military strategy too that the Buddha teaches a lot with, and that's that you're essentially in a war with the defilements. I mean, just to kind of say it in one way, and we shouldn't just think that we're going to be defeated by them. We're not going to, like, you have aversion and greed. We have like restlessness, worry, there's fear, there's all kinds of experiences that we have coming up, and we need to do something with them. We don't want to be overwhelmed by them or overrun by them. And so with first, like, as we're talking about establishing morality, once that's kind of adhered to and one is continually kind of grounded in one's own moral compass, as I was saying, then you have to kind of look that the mind is consistently still shifting. It's like a restless child or something, and it's like it's going to keep moving for a long time. And so the methods that we use to pacify it don't always work, and we have to come up with other ways. Like sometimes you have to distract the mind like you would a little child, or you have to please it in a certain way. You have to bring it to a sense of enjoyment. How do you get your mind to just enjoy or find some pleasantness in what it's doing? So it's quite a task that we're set to, and as the Buddha said, it's the most difficult task. There's nothing more difficult than taming our own mind, and it's important to know that you're not doing something easy, and he never said it was easy. So
I said it was pretty hard. And I think a useful so the four right efforts are one of the categorical teachings of the Buddha, which meant he said they could be applied in every situation alongside the Four Noble Truths. Those are the two teachings he said are always applicable, and they are to prevent unwholesome states that have not arisen from arising, to abandon unwholesome states that have arisen already, to develop wholesome states which have arisen, and then to bring into being wholesome states which have not yet arisen. And they can be compared in the raft metaphor. The Buddha's compares us crossing to enlightenment as paddling across a river on a raft, and the two efforts of trying to bring wholesome states into being and developing wholesome states that have arisen are the two hands swimming, and then the feet kicking are the abandoning of unwholesome states. And I think another useful image that the Buddha uses is there's the famous story of Venerable Sona, the monk who he walks meditation until his feet are bleeding, and then the Buddha, he's thinking of disrobing and is very discouraged, and then the Buddha sort of pops up and shows up out of nowhere, and says, "Are you thinking of disrobing?" And Venerable Sona says, "Yes." And basically the Buddha says, "Did you play the lute? And when the strings were too tight, was it, were you able to play beautifully and harmoniously?" And Ajahn Sona says no, and then eventually they come to basically the strings have to be tuned correctly and just right. And the significant thing there is that the lute in the time of the Buddha had 5 strings, and in this case they're analogous to the 5 faculties of indriyas, of faith, energy, mindfulness, samadhi, and concentration and wisdom. And so the Buddha there is really saying that you have to figure out what level of effort you're capable of and then tune those other faculties to it. And that you'll really, I think you do sort of see, if you're putting forth too much effort, you can really see by those other faculties start to decline and get out of tune. Like you aren't getting more calm, concentrated. Your faith is waxing and waning. Maybe you're putting too much or too little effort in. And so I think you can judge the level of effort, the tune of that string, by the resonance of the other 4. And I think also it's useful because there's that analogy of the harmony of it. And for me, right effort, when it really is in tune, has that quality of feeling there's a grace of movement, a harmony to it. Like it feels like I'm doing as I should in this situation. So for me, it's kind of intuitive over time as well.
Yeah, I think the one of the important points is the too much, and that's also the error. So you hear right effort, and we think like, okay, I got to make some effort here, and because I'm a real sinner, or whatever it might be. So I think that one of the issues we also have is too much. We're too tense. We're too tight. We put too much focus on like our success, or not being able to fail, and I better be the best meditator in the world, or whatever it is. So it's really important to kind of look at that stress that we can cause ourselves in terms of just pushing ourselves, and that's really a thing that many people relate to, is that sense that you have this kind of like I love how Ajahn Jeff talks about committee members that we have these different voices in our heads, and one of them is usually this this just kind of tyrannical pusher, this being that just it can only do it can't be happy. There's no way to make it happy, because as soon as you reach some sort of level of satisfaction, it'll just bump it up. Well, no, you haven't really reached you're only really still at the bottom level. So some people talk about that as being the inner tyrant, the one who just won't let you settle. Won't there's no there's nothing good enough. And so, as Ajahn Sucitto wrote a book about that, I really like how he said unseating the inner tyrant, and that's what we have to do. We have to unseat that voice. We have to actually figure out ways that we can say, okay, not trust that voice. So I think just one of the comments that was made was creating dukkha around, feeling pain, and then we come up with a belief. We have a sankhara arise out of that, which is I can never be on retreat again. And so really, like, that is the inner critic. That's the I'm never going to be able to do this thing. And it comes back to the first thing I was talking about, which was the belief we can have in our own mind around what we're experiencing right now. And so just coming back to that and coming full circle, it's like, well, okay, yeah, let's say I am experiencing an immense amount of back pain. That is right now, and that can be for years. You can experience the same kind of pain, but we come up with our own beliefs, our own sankharas around that, our own mental formations, the way that we perceive that, and then our minds move from that into a story. And it's easy to say don't believe the story, but basically don't believe the story, because you just have to keep coming back to that present moment experience. Like, well, I don't know about the future and about my possibility of retreat. I can't know it. I might be doing a 3-year retreat a year from now. I have no idea. And then we can come up with like just ideas of what is retreat and what is the past and the future, and all of these senses that our minds get lost into so many concepts that are not the present moment. They're just a way for us to kind of try to deal with pain that's maladaptive. So to think about what I can or can't do based on the pain is maladaptive because it's not going to actually do anything. It's not practicing the Dhamma. So the Dhamma is, okay, what is present right now is dukkha. There's me wanting not to be in pain. And so what can I do here? I can know the pain. I can know that there's nuances to it. It's not constant. It's not something that I can say is permanent, because it does change. There are times when there isn't back pain, or that the pain is diminished or increased or in a different place. And so the more we start to know that, then we get interested and say, okay, it's inconstant. This is what the Buddha taught. And then you're really on retreat, because then you actually understand, okay, this is what the Buddha's teaching is, not to go into the future and try to figure everything out, because we can't. Because you might be in back pain now, but you could also be dead 5 minutes from now. We don't really know our future, so we want to try to practice with that present state of mind, so that we're not spinning out in some other place where I no longer have back pain and it's not a problem, because there'll be some other problem that will plague us.
Speaks to what you were talking about at the beginning of the session around like how it's hard to get that step back from the practice a bit. And I think we all have had that. I don't know how bad the back pain is, and that I think is a significant issue for people, a lot of them. I do know that both Ajahn Chunda and I have had various things come up in our practice, and I find that they were problems, but when I'm meditating, they tend to become very magnified, and it is hard to get some perspective on it. And I do also know monks, apart from just physical therapy and stuff, I know monks who sit in chairs, who've ended up, taking some lying down meditation. I think there's a certain Westerner pride around wanting to sit lotus or something, but I've never really bought into those. I think there are skillful ways of meditating one way or the other, and I very much doubt that your dharmic path will close based on this at all. And Ajahn Jeff says that the pain is like a watering hole. Like if you're looking for the various kind of creatures and defilements in the mind, you can sort of take a jeep and run around the savannah, but if you just wait right by the watering hole, they'll all come to you. And pain's the same. It can be a great powerful teacher, but it's not to say it's fun to have all the time. So I hope it gets better.
And it can be overwhelming. That is the truth of it. So there are levels of pain, and we have to sort of figure out what we can deal with in certain ways. And so actually sometimes it can be unbearable, and so either medicine might be appropriate, seeing physical therapists, as you mentioned, doctors, whatever it might be, is definitely an option. I mean, chronic pain is something that one really does need to kind of have a sense of how do I handle this in my practice. Just so the I think it was Adam who stated that knows the Buddha had a very painful back, and he often needed to, towards the end of his life, he needed to ask some of the other monks to give Dhamma talks. So he would ask Ananda to give a Dhamma talk when his back was too painful. And people think, how is that possible? You know, the Buddha, you know, he's perfect. You know, he doesn't experience pain, and that's totally wrong. He was human and he had a body. And he experienced all kinds of things, and he died like the rest of us tend to die. You know, he had a disease. Well, I don't think he died actually in the same way. He was, I think, able to endure it longer, but he did die of a natural cause, and so it's also important to liken that there isn't really a perfection outside of pain. There isn't. Even like I think with meditative absorption, one's still going to come back into the present experience where one is not in meditative absorption and has to deal with that pain. So it's just important to I think really see the pain that you experience as the work of your practice, and try not to. Sounds pretty silly, but try not to let it get you down. In terms of going too far with thoughts about it as doing with your past or your future. So,
and I just posted a piece from Ajahn Jeff on dealing with pain as well. And I know Longpa Pasno has said if you do need to take some lying down meditation, the trick is to not move. Like once you get your posture lying down, just don't like fidget and stuff, and then you can actually stay fairly mindful even in that situation. And I found that as a helpful tip in case it comes to that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I personally experienced a fair amount of pain, especially in my feet, and I've had to do a lot of work with my own practice, but also I do a fair amount of physical work to try to work with that, to try to deal with the pain. So I actually manipulate the muscles and the tendons and stretch them and do yoga and all kinds of things. So it's not that I'm not actually trying to deal with the body and by just using sort of meditation as the sole source. It becomes a meditation. Doing that, really focusing on the body and being aware of it. But it takes a couple hours a day that I do this, and each of us has our own karma, where we're sort of born with these bodies, and we have to deal with them. And some of it is karma, some of it is not necessarily karma. But coming to, I think, the sort of the bigger picture is it's not a personal thing. It's not something about me or that I won't be able to do something or can't do something. It's more like, how do we deal with it right now? So, we could talk about a further question, getting back to the first precept again. We had a question about killing animals, and not hunting, but actually like with pests. What do you do with pests? And I'm sure many of you have probably had to deal with this. What do you do to maintain the first precept when you have like an issue with insects or mice or whatever it might be? There was a bear here, I think. So that was quite a pest.
We didn't do anything about that.
No. Well, we repaired what the bear broke. It ripped up the internet wire.
Really?
Yeah, it climbed up a pole. So I don't think it was going after the wire, though. But anyway, the question is, what do you do if you've exhausted your efforts in trying to deal with a pest that is actually causing problems in your life? So, like, I think in this case it was moths, a moth invasion that got out of hand. And I think we'll have to adjust the level because I'm as close to the mic as I possibly could be, if you're not able to hear me.
And also, if if one has the intention that if those paths come into being that one would get rid of them, can one say that one is holding the first precept as well?
Yeah, I mean, this has had to be dealt with. For example, in a monastery I know where they basically had a cockroach infestation. I think there was this type of cockroach called German cockroaches, I think, and they were like, there was something about them that was they multiplied a lot, and they couldn't get rid of them, and so they tried and tried and tried. I think for a very long period of time, and finally it was just what can you do? You know, you're trying and you clean everything out. You empty out all the food in like the place where you keep the food, and they keep coming back. We've done everything possible. You get rid of everything, and then they still somehow come back. So you know the monks had to figure out like how do we deal with this, and how they did was they said, okay, we've tried every single thing possible. So they chanted, they asked it already happened, asked the cockroaches to leave, and in any way tried to get them out of there, but eventually they had to call the pest control to come in and spray. And I don't think it was in a sense of like have somebody else deal with it. It was just like, okay, this is what needs to be done. So the advocacy in this, or the lesson in this, is that you really you don't just have like okay, I made an effort not to deal with, not to have to kill, so now I'm going to go and kill these things. It's really like, well, no, you keep trying to make that effort until there's just nothing else you can possibly do. And even then, I wouldn't advocate killing. But one has to make one's own mind up in terms of how you deal with this problem, because we do have to sometimes deal with situations as human beings where we can't get rid of something. And even in our own bodies, we have pests, we have beings that we have to deal with, like worms or whatever it is. So it is a good question. It's something that isn't just hypothetical. It comes up, and I think the best motive is just to keep asking yourself if you've tried absolutely everything.
And a good story I heard Ajahn Amaro speak of, somewhat related, was he was trying to keep a plant in his room, and it kept getting covered in aphids, and it was like this big source of suffering for him for many weeks, until he decided that he would stop keeping a plant and start keeping an aphid farm.
That's another way.
Appreciated that.
Yeah. So there's different ways of looking at it. But if you have there's sometimes there's not a way. I remember a seminary stayed at the Casa Serena, over at Casa Serena in one of the kutis, and she wasn't getting any sleep. And when we asked her why, it turns out to be she just thought she had to deal with the ants and not do anything with them, including sweeping them up, which wouldn't kill them. It was kind of a humorous story, but at the same time, she was really going, it was really becoming kind of traumatic for her because she wasn't sleeping. She was just getting woken up by these ants. And so there's sort of appropriate wisdom, and when it's good to take care of things and figure it out. I thought you were gonna say that he put the plant outside rather than kept an aphid
that
farm,
might work.
But
Eventually he might have.
Yeah, put it outside or somewhere else, or
yeah, and sorry,
no, go ahead.
Just that, yeah, there does. What is the other one? But I think really like pouring ourselves into trying to keep that precept really well is I mean, I know Ajahn Karuna Dhamma was talking about when he decided to keep the first precept as a layman, and really like he had aphids all over his garden, and just he started to spend a decent amount of time each week, collecting them and moving them like to a different spot basically. And I don't think his garden was as good, but apparently it was good enough, and I think that there was probably great benefit in that for him as well, just that action. Yeah, so I mean, it's not a house, but it's there's these stories as well.
Yeah, and it's important also just in general when as we're talking about this kind of situation, like to not think, oh well, I shouldn't have said, yeah, you shouldn't. Well, just eventually just kill them. Try a little bit. And no, like that's not the advocacy here. So remember that it's just do not kill under any circumstances, and we just try and try again to follow that. Yeah, and so that's I think the best advice to give. Like the other thing is, like if you say, well, I've tried everything, and I would say, well, keep trying. Keep trying. Otherwise, that's we had another question about addiction and when is it good for somebody who is addicted to drugs or alcohol to start to try meditation out, and how effective is it if you suggest meditation but they're not actually off of the drugs or alcohol, and which is a good it was kind of either come as you are to meditate or wait until you're sober, and I said wait until you're sober. That was my answer. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily beneficial to teach somebody who is addicted to the point where they don't have any space in their life where the substance is not actually influencing them. But I did say that if somebody is addicted to a substance, but then they have a period of not being influenced by that substance. So, like, I think it's obvious what I mean. You're drunk or you're buzzed or whatever, and then you're not. And so if there's a time that you're not, then I would suggest, yes, one doesn't have to become clean and sober and, have not used for a month or something like that to benefit from meditation. So I think in that approach, it's sort of meditation can be beneficial for people, especially, if they're addicted to a substance and they're still using, but I would kind of try to stay away from it if one's under the influence.
Yeah, and also that getting help on other means can be really helpful. I know that there was one of my friends worked at a rehab center and I think it was a counseling center, and one of the patients had schizoid personality disorder, I think. And was really going off the deep end. This is different than addiction, but it's similarly a pretty intense state. And instead of doing the usual rehab, what they did was the regimen was this person was supposed to eat, I think, 3 hamburgers and then run around their center for about 5 hours every day, or maybe like 20 miles. And that was his practice. So right effort can take different forms in certain circumstances. And, perhaps, meditation might be difficult if you're really in the depths of it, although like Ajahn Chunda is saying, if there's moments of clarity and you can sit, that's great. But also if things are just too intense and the voices are too brutal, you could go for a run, and if there's 2 cheeseburgers before that, maybe that helps or not, but sometimes
veggie cheeseburgers.
veggie burgers, sorry, veggie burgers, but the point being, yeah, use the body as well. Really get into the body, and sometimes taking up a sport like boxing or something can really help. I've heard quite good things around that as well. So
yeah, I think we might have even touched on that in one of our live streams. That like I was suggesting, because before I was a monk, I was a mental health counselor for a while, and that was not necessarily the thing that we would suggest for people who experienced auditory or visual hallucinations was, get into meditation. That'll really help you. Because when those people did meditate, some of them, not all of them, but some people who have those kind of hallucinations, this will increase the hallucinations. And it doesn't mean that meditation is never beneficial, but it needs to be tread upon quite lightly in terms of its use in that kind of a situation. And so with I think it's a bit different though with substances. But as I learned when I was a mental health counselor, the two were quite intertwined. So mental health and substance abuse were constantly really a part of each other. They were like, 2 conjoined spheres. And if somebody came in with a substance abuse issue, they almost always had a mental health issue. And if they had a mental health issue, they usually had a substance abuse issue. In fact, it was something like only about 10 to 20% of the people we saw just had no substance abuse problems. it was most of them were mixed. So anyway, those are some possible answers to some questions around that. And it's already a little bit past our 45-minute period. So it's been nice being with everyone and being with my venerable friend here. And perhaps if there's any other things that you want to talk about next time with Venerable Nisabho, you can do that on Friday morning. Otherwise, I will see you on Tuesday. And nice to see everyone here again. I very much enjoy the community.
Likewise.
Yeah.
And we'll try to remember that one for next week, Karina.
Yes.
Well. Yeah. And it's great to see everyone.
Okay. Be well.